I want to believe, but. There's always a but, isn't there? I want to believe, but. And we're talking about some of the hurdles or challenges that people have in their faith. Because there's a lot of people that they want to believe in God, but there's something that happened. There's something that happened, some reason, some hurdle that it just keeps them from completely believing. And today I want to talk about one of those hurdles. And it's called, I want to believe, but goosebump God. I want to believe in God, but I just don't feel Him. And for those of you that follow me on Facebook, I'm so sorry for the jokes. I think they're funny. I don't care what you think. And but if you saw my Facebook page, you noticed Holy Grounds has opened back up again. And I love Holy Grounds. It's not just because it's got great coffee and bagels. Thank you for the plug. But it's because I go there and I have office hours and I run into so many people and we say prayers and we talk about things and it reminds me of this one time at the other location, this lady comes up to me at Holy Grounds and I could tell she was really hurting. And you can tell. And she opened up about how his dad that she really loved, had passed away from a very aggressive form of cancer when she was younger. And she went on to explain that her mom is just a total mess. It's true. A total mess, and it's understandable. Mom is not a follower of Jesus. And this woman said, I'm so hurt and I'm so troubled. And so I'm going to church every week because I need some kind of spiritual help and spiritual support. Going to church. The only problem is I just don't feel anything when I'm there. She said people are singing and they obviously feel something. But I feel numb. She goes, I try to read the Bible, and when I do, I just don't understand it. I get nothing out of it. And she said, I'll pray. It's like I'm talking to myself. I feel absolutely nothing. Now, she didn't say the exact words, but you could tell her heart was like, I want to believe, but. I want to believe, but I don't feel anything. And if we're being honest with ourselves, this is where so many people find themselves today. I'd love to believe there's a personal God who wants to be involved in my life, but I talk to him and I don't really get a response from him. I don't feel him. And what makes it worse when you do that? You have those moments where you just don't feel God. There's that one person you come across, that one annoying little person always feels God. You know them. They're like, I'm driving and God put my favorite song on the radio. And I said this to God. He said this to me. I said this to God. And then God said, oh, yeah, that's amazing. And then I drove to the mall and God gave me the perfect parking spot. And my husband got a raise and God got my son into the most prestigious college in the nation with a full ride scholarship. And you're thinking, I didn't like any of the songs God put on the radio this morning. And I had to walk half a mile uphill in the snow to get to the mall. And on top of that, my husband got laid off. My son got rejected to Allegheny College. Where is God in my life? She has all this. What about me? And so many people, they're right there in that spot. There are a lot of people that they want to believe in God. They want to put their trust in Him and His plans. But there's something that keeps them from completely believing, completely trusting Him. How do you believe in a God you can't see? You don't hear Him speak. You don't feel Him. I want to believe in God, people. But so everybody today, I need some help on this next one. I'm going to ask you this. So if last week, if you were here, raise the other hand. Let's work out the other shoulder today. This is for those of you who are Jesus, there you go, that are Jesus followers. How many of you, show of hands, would say that at some point in your life, you've experienced and felt the presence of God? Show your hands. My gosh, look at that. My gosh. Now I'm just curious. You can put your hands down. Thank you, thank you, thank you. How about in church today? How many of you would say, I really feel like I feel the presence of God in church today? Let's see a show of hands. Lots of hands. That's amazing. We know it's not the pastor. Pat, it must be your music. Now I'm going to ask you this. How do you know? How do you know? Some of you say, well, I get all tingly. I get a little tingly goosebumps. Some of you say that, I felt a real presence of peace in my life at some point. Some of you say, well, I actually cried. You get tingly. You know what the problem is? Sometimes you can get tingly sitting just close to that cute person who smells really good. It happens. Has anybody ever gotten a little misty-eyed watching a video or watching a movie? I'm going to show Old Yeller in a second. A little emotional. Well, I have. I felt peaceful with nice lighting, a bubble bath, maybe some Barry White on. Maybe some of y'all prefer Barry White. Or maybe some of y'all prefer Barry Manilow. I don't know. Whatever makes you feel good. Whatever makes you feel peaceful. So how do you know? If you said you felt the presence of God, how do you know when you feel Him? And if you didn't raise your hand, or if you don't feel God in church, whose fault is it? Is it God's fault? God's like, giving it to Belinda and Charlie today. I'm not going to give it to Robbie and Sophia. I'm going to give it to everybody else, not you. So I'm going to teach you a lesson. I got my eye on you today, Barbara, Mom. So if you can't feel me today, is it your fault? Because you didn't have the spiritual antenna up? Or is it your music director's fault because they didn't pick your favorite song that gives you goosebumps every time you sing it? How do you know if you really felt God or not? I want to feel God. I'll confess, I don't feel God all the time. I don't always feel God. And for those of you that might be doubting right now because you haven't felt some kind of spiritual intimacy, some kind of tingling or whatever you want to call it, some goosebumps, whatever it is, if you don't always feel God's presence, you're not alone. If you don't always feel the presence of God in a very real way, you're not alone. In fact, it gives me comfort in those times where I seem a little spiritually dry, when I seem a little spiritually empty, that the psalmist cries out in Psalm 88, today's scripture, Psalm 88, verse 13 and 14. And it says, God, but I cry out to you for help, Lord, in the morning. See, not even waiting until lunchtime. He's crying out in the morning. Probably before he had his coffee. And I need your help, God. In the morning, my prayer comes before you. Why, Lord? Why do you reject me and hide your face from me? I want to feel you, God, but I don't feel anything. So it made me think of some of the greats in the Bible. You see, there were times when they seemed very spiritually dry. And often it was difficult for them to sense the presence of God in some moments. You don't have to look very far, but let's look at David. He had this very intimate tie with God, a man after God's own heart. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? For you are with me. He's feeling them. But at other times he cries out to God, where are you? I can't feel you. Why aren't you answering my prayers? Why are you allowing my enemies to do this? God, where are you? It wasn't always, I feel you with me. And Paul in the New Testament, this guy personally experiences the risen Christ. He had this heavenly experience one time, so glorious, he's not even allowed to talk about it. You know what he did for the next 17 years of his life after he became a follower of Christ? He's wanting to preach. He waited. He waited, and he waited. He was making tents. He wasn't preaching. He was making tents. God, give me a chance. Where are you? Where are you, God? I'm ready to go in. But God, I just don't feel you. And Jesus. Think about this. And Jesus, who walked in the most intimate fellowship moment by moment with God, is on the cross. He becomes sin for us. And I can't fully explain why or what happened. Scriptures aren't totally clear about it, but evidently when Jesus became sin and died for our sins, God is so holy, he couldn't look upon it. So whatever happens, the world is going dark as Jesus gives his life. The world is going dark as Jesus gives his life. And he looks up in his most desperate moment and he cries out, my God, where are you? Why have you forsaken me? This is Jesus, God's Son, in his greatest moment of brokenness. God, I felt you my whole life, and I can't feel you now. Where are you, God? Well, some of y'all might be feeling a little bit lacking at times. You might not feel God, and it causes you a problem with your belief. Well, the answer is maybe some of y'all are over-sensationalizing it. Maybe you're doing exactly what the disciples did when it was recorded in John 6:30. Like, give us some big, bold, clear sign. I want a billboard, God. Put it up and tell me. And so they asked Jesus, what sign will you give me that we may see it and believe in you? What are you going to do, Jesus? And they even start bringing up the past, and they go, our ancestors ate manna in the wilderness, and it's written that God gave them bread from heaven to eat. You know, God did this miracle. There's bread from heaven. Give us something like that. Give us some sense that God is really with us. Some of you, maybe you're doing the same thing. You may be over-sensationalizing it. Perhaps there's some of you that you're looking for something that's just not there, because God is with you always. And if you're taking notes, there's something I want to say, but I don't want to use it to scare you. But as your pastor, I do feel obligated to share this with you. There are some of you, you may not feel God because maybe your heart has become a little hardened. You were close to God at one point. You were close to God at one time. And now your heart is not so soft to the things of God. And this was Jesus quoting the prophet Isaiah in Matthew 13. Matthew 13 is somewhere around 14 or 15, I think. And when Jesus said this, you'll be ever hearing, but never understanding. You'll be ever seeing, but never perceiving. And then he said, for his people's heart has become calloused. You know, it's got like those calcium deposits building up and causing the heart to grow harder. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have their eyes closed, and they've closed their eyes. Well, some of you, maybe it's a fact that some of you have allowed your heart to grow hard to the things of God. And you need to understand the number one cause of a hard heart is sin. Sin in your life that separates you from God. And if you sin against God, does that mean God doesn't love you anymore and that you're not a Christian? No, absolutely not. Your sin against God and you're a follower of Jesus, you're still a follower of Jesus. But what happens is sin breaks the intimacy with God. For example, let's say you're married. Let's say you got a husband and a wife sort of situation, and the husband or the wife commits adultery. You know, what happens? Are they still married? Yes. You're still married. Are they as intimate as they were before? No. Now intimacy trust was broken. That sin separates and breaks the fellowship that was there. And this is what happens with God. Whenever we live with ongoing sin, okay, let's just fess up. We all mess up. I mess up. You mess up. I'll mess up today. You'll mess up today. But when we continue to live in it and we're not repenting of it before God, if we're not confessing, saying, God, help cleanse me of this, remove this from my heart, when we're not dealing with it over time, it's like that plaque that builds up on our heart. It grows hard. And suddenly we can't sense that God is there. And I know some of you might be saying, well, I'm not doing some of the big sins. I'm not in the big times yet. And that's really good. Congratulations. The problem is so many of us learn to live with what I call sanitized sins, or what I've preached about before when I said necessary sins. See, culture just kind of says, well, everybody does it. Everybody does it. And it's not that big of a deal, is it really? So we go on living with it. Living with it and living with it and living with it and living with it. I don't know what it might be. It might be envy. You can't see your neighbor's new car or go on Instagram without going, I want that car. I want that purse. You go to the car shows and you go, I want that car. I need that car. I want to go on that trip. And I wish I had that guy or that girl. I hate them. I don't know why these people are my friends. I hate them all. Envy. And you live with it. It could be gossip. Did I tell you about so-and-so? We need to pray about her, right? Gossip. Could be lust. And you know, woo, right? You got to live with it. Again, could be gluttony. Could be laziness. Could be some sanitized sin that just kind of lives there. Could it be maybe gluttony, greed, some of the sanitized sins that we just live with that may be blocking our intimacy with God? So let me explain it to you this way. I know it's going to be in the 90s this week. It might even break 100 1 or 2 days a week. But let's say it's 15 degrees below zero. We're in Allegheny County. We're going to see that at some point. I mean, it's freezing outside. And so what happens, you get all bundled up in your best gear. You got this amazing hat you put on that keeps you warm. And I've got this one special hat that keeps my head warm. And it has Bluetooth speakers built into it. I love it. And you got this, you got earmuffs. You got one of those ski mask things that covers you up like you're going to be a robber or something. And you put a scarf around your neck. And you got on those full body long johns to keep you warm. You got the best coat. You got the big, thick ski pants. You got wool socks. You got great boots with little heaters in them. You got the best gloves of all time. And you walk out. What do you not feel? You don't feel cold. It's cold, but you don't feel cold. And why don't you feel cold? Because something is separating you from what is really there. So think about it. It could be that God is all around you, that God is with you, but there is a layer of unrepentant sin that keeps you from experiencing what is already there. I don't know, some of y'all are saying in your head, I'm not, cheating on my wife. I'm not. And I'm not lusting after anything. I'll have envy. I'll have envy and greed. And I serve God faithfully, and I'm always in His Word, and I'm always in church every time the door is open. And in your case, maybe it could be that instead of having a heart of pure devotion, you're so into works that you think that that's your ticket to get into heaven to see God. I don't know what it might be, but if there's anything that is separating you from God, your heart is growing somewhat harder. If you don't always feel the presence of God, it could be that you're over sensationalizing it. It could be that there's something that's actually blocking the intimacy of a real, true, intimate relationship with God. He's there, but you just can't feel him. Sometimes God sanctifies us by humbling us. He works his salvation out in us by taking us through the valleys of the cross. And it often means that, feeling alone and feeling abandoned. And this may be why God didn't tell Joseph his plans for Mary at all at first. He wanted Mary to feel the shame of the cross. Moses had to endure the wilderness of isolation for 40 years after God called him. Paul had to learn to suffer. In reality, we most certainly are not alone during these dark times. But walking by faith, believing that we are not alone, even when you can't feel the warmth of God's presence. Maybe as he leads us through those dark valleys, silent valleys, is that he wants to purify our hearts. Why do we want to be close to God? Is it because of what he gives us? Or is it simply because we want him? What is more valuable to us, God or his blessings? See, sometimes God withholds everything from us except his promises. Except his promises in order to make us ask ourselves, is his promise enough for me? And you can never, ever know that Jesus is all that you need until he's all that you have. So let me ask you a very important question. One that the survival of your faith actually depends on. Can you walk by faith in God's promises alone? Even when you can't see or feel or hear anything? Can you delay gratification, even the gratification of feeling the Holy Spirit? See, whenever you experience God, whether you experience God and you get tingly feelings or you don't, whether you get massive goosebumps or you don't, whether you start to cry and worship or you don't, whether you feel his peace or you don't have that sense of outward feeling, don't panic, because anytime you seek him, he's there.